Thank you, Nick, for praying. We have come to the 16th verse of Philippians chapter 2, and we're going to carry on from verse 17. But before I do that, I had promised on Friday, in response to a question, to give the Greek meaning for the word blameless in Philippians 2:15. In verse 14-15, Paul writes, Philippians 2, do everything without complaining or arguing. They may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a crooked and depraved generation. The word blameless is topoi, which basically means not deserving of blame. Very simple word, not deserving of blame. Sometimes when we do something wrong deliberately, we deserve to be blamed for it. But sometimes we do things we are not conscious of. We hurt people by the way we speak, what we do without intending to do so. And then when they get upset and they say we have sinned against them, we are blameless because we acted ignorantly. For example, in the 17th chapter of Acts, when the Apostle Paul is speaking to the Greeks in Athens, they're worshipping idols, ignorant. They did not know what they were doing. And in 17th chapter, verse 30, it says, in the past, God overlooked such ignorance. Ignorantly, we do something wrong, God doesn't hold it against us. We are blameless. So they can't be blamed for doing that. Once we have a revelation of Christ, we know him, and then we do these things, then we have to be blamed. So that's the meaning of topi, which is basically blameless. And let's go on from verse 17. I'll complete verse 16. As you shine like stars in the universe, as you hold out the word of life. When we spoke about how holding out basically means word of life is Christ, 1 John 1:1. Christ in us will be seen by others, not physically seen. The effect of Christ in us be seen by others. As we hold out the word of life, holding forth the Lord Christ who lives in us, and also in that process, working out our salvation. Then it goes on to say, so that in order that I may boast on the day of Christ, that I would not run or labor for nothing. We labor on the Lord is never in vain. And Paul says, when you do these things, I will realize, I will know that I've not labored for nothing, and I can talk about it. I don't know how, that point of time, to whom we talk about, we don't know. But one thing is, remember, what we take from this world to heaven is not our possessions, not our achievements, not what we have gained in this world, physically, materially, but rather people. In 1 Thessalonians, in chapter 2, 19-20, Paul writes, what is our joy, our hope, our crown, which we rejoice in the day of the Lord? Is it not you? You are our glory and joy. People whom we minister to, who be instrumental in building up and instrumental in their salvation, these people will be our glory, our crown in heaven. So Paul says, I will rejoice in that. I know that I will not labor in vain, but I boast about the fact that through the power of the Lord, always to the power of the Lord only we minister. And in fact, he says, I will not speak of anything except what Christ has accomplished through me. Romans 15:18. I will venture to speak of nothing except what Christ has accomplished through me, not me accomplishing for Christ. So basically, it's boasting about what Christ did in him as he was sincerely responding to God's call and labored for the Lord, and labors never in vain. Let's go on from verse 17. But even if I am being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from your faith, I am glad, rejoice with all of you. I am being poured out like a drink offering. Now, this term drink offering is used also in the letter of Paul to Timothy, in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 6. Here I'm already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time has come for my departure. Just before he realized he's going to go to heaven, he's going to die. from a physical point of view, human point of view, is I'm already poured like drink offering, and the time has come for my departure. This term drink offering is used twice in the New Testament, only twice. One is here, Philippians 2:17. Other is 2 Timothy 4:6. I'm already poured like a drink offering. What's this drink offering? We read about that in the book of Numbers, 28th chapter, verse 7. When they offered the burnt offering at the altar, along with the burnt offering, they'll pour out a fermented drink of approximately 1 liter of fermented wine on the altar, which is called the drink offering, along with the regular burnt offering. In fact, the first time I read about that is in the book of Genesis, 35th chapter, verse 14, where when in Bethel, when Jacob spoke to God, he commemorated that conversation with God with a stone altar, and on the altar, he poured out a drink offering. What's the New Testament significance of drink offering? The ultimate offering, sacrifice, was the sacrifice of Christ. And Paul says, I've been poured like a drink offering upon that sacrifice, meaning to fulfill God's purpose of dying, of Christ dying for the whole world, I go about giving myself completely to the service of the Lord and offering my body as a living sacrifice to bring about awareness of this gospel. Along with Jesus, he sacrificed on the cross for everybody in the world. People don't know that. And I go about fulfilling that call of sharing the gospel, that everyone whom I come in contact with will get to hear the gospel. In that process, he emptied himself, a drink offering. He poured out like a drink offering. So a drink offering accompanies the actual offering. Old Testament, burnt offering, Numbers 28:7, also Genesis 35:14, along with the main sacrifice in Numbers 28:7 will be the drink offering. So Paul says the sacrifice of Christ is ultimate, but then I also realize the call I have got, and I poured myself out for the sake of people, for their salvation, out of love for God. So he's talking about pouring the Lord like drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from your faith. So these people in Philippi were serving God. They were also sacrificing many things. And he says that my drink offering, my pouring myself out was for your benefit. And therefore, I'm glad that I poured myself out. I emptied myself. In fact, I worked hard. Pouring yourself out basically means working hard in the ministry. 1 Corinthians 15:10, Paul writes, by the grace of God, I am what I am. The grace is not without effect. No, I worked harder than all of them. Yet not I, but the grace of God working with me. What he's saying is, God gave me his grace to be able to work hard to receive more grace from God and use that grace for glorifying God and edifying his people. Every ministry, the motive must be to glorify the name of Jesus and to build up people. It's not about us, it's not about our name, but the Lord being glorified and people being edified. So verse 18. So you also should be glad and rejoice with me. So you too should be glad and rejoice with me, because they were upset that Paul was in prison in Rome. Paul was very close to them. That's why so many verses in this letter of Philippians is rejoice, 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 14 times rejoicing. And he was very close to the church in Philippi, and they were very close to him. And they were feeling bad that he's in prison in Rome. He said, you rejoice. I pour like a drink offering because of your service and your faith. I rejoice and I'm glad in it, that even though I spent so much of time with you and faced so many difficulties while I was with you, I rejoice that you are serving God. You're making sacrifices for the Lord and serving him. I'm glad and rejoice. So you also must be glad. You must rejoice. In other words, don't feel sorry for me because I'm in prison. Verse 19. I hope in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you soon, that I also may be cheered when I receive news about you. Now, one thing about fellowship is when you share with people about what God is doing in your life, there's a lot of encouragement. And he knew fully well that church in Philippi is growing. And he said, I'm sending Timothy to you. When he comes to you, you know about me, and I will know about you when he comes back. That I also may be cheered when I receive news about you. So knowing about them for Paul was encouragement, being cheered up. And for them know about Paul is also to be encouraged and be cheered up. Because when people meet together as Christians, our conversation must be Christ-centered. In Colossians chapter 4, verse 6, Paul writes, let a conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt. So they always send messengers to each other about sharing about what God is doing in each of these churches to encourage each other in the faith. One of the purposes of fellowship is encouragement. Hebrews 10:25. Let us not stop meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but let's encourage each other. The Apostle Paul wrote to the church in Rome. He had not been to Rome yet, but he wrote to the Roman Christians. Romans chapter 1, 11 and 12. I long to see you and impart to you some spiritual gift to make you strong. That is, you and I be mutually encouraged by each other's faith. In the same lines, Paul writes to the church in Philippi, I'm sending Timothy to you that you'll be encouraged by what he says about me, and I'll be encouraged by what he says about you when he comes back to Rome. That's the sentiment behind this particular verse. And always their conversation was Christ-centered, these people. Look at verse 20, beautiful verse, these two. I take both together. I have no one else like him who takes a genuine interest in your welfare. For everyone looks out to his own interest, for his own interest, not those of Jesus Christ. What an amazing commendation and recognition of the ministry of Timothy. Now, the Apostle Paul had many co-workers with whom he worked, fellow laborers, co-laborers with God and co-laborers with each other. Paul and Barnabas, Paul and Silas, there was Timothy, Trophimus, Titus, Alexander, Secundus, Gaius, so many co-workers. Among all these people, the Apostle Paul identified Timothy for special mention. Something very unique about Timothy. That's how people say today, USP, unique selling point. Of course, there's no selling point for Timothy. Something unique about him, that he took up the interest of the church. I've known this like him, who take genuine interest in your welfare. Each one looks for his own interest, not those of Jesus Christ. Timothy took up the interests of the church in Philippi because he took up the interests of Jesus. Meaning, he was a friend of Jesus. As you're a friend of Jesus, you will take up his concerns for people, receive from Jesus the concerns he has for people, and because he has a concern for them, out of love for him, we will go and minister to people and put people's concerns above our own concerns, because people's concerns are Christ's concerns. Remember the time when the Lord restored Peter back to the fellowship. 21st chapter of John, after Peter goes fishing and Lord appears to them, the disciples, by the shore of Sea of Tiberias. And then the Lord is asking Peter a question. Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? 21st chapter of John, verse 15. You know I love you, Lord. Feed my lambs. 2 more times the Lord asked him this question. Do you love me? I love you, Lord. Feed my sheep. Do you love me? Love you, Lord. Take care of my sheep. In fact, the first time the Lord asked him the question, do you love me? He used the word agape. Agape is godly love, sacrificial love. Peter responds by saying, you know I love you, Lord. He used the word phileo. Phileo means love as a friend. Agape is godly love. Question was, do you love me more than these? You know I love you, Lord. Use the word phileo. A love as a friend. Second time, again, the Lord asked the same question. Do you love me? Agape. Answer, you know I love you, Lord. Phileo. The third time, the Lord himself asked the same question, but different word he uses for love, not agape. Do you love me? He puts the word phileo. Do you love me as a friend? As if to say, you don't even love me as a friend. And Peter is probably a little bit upset by the Lord asking such a question. He says, you know, I love you, Lord. If you love me, feed my lambs, feed my sheep, take care of my sheep. So in ministry, when we serve people, it must be out of love for God. And we'll never stop serving God because every small thing we do, he takes note of. Hebrews 6:10. God is not unjust. He will not forget your work or the love you have shown him as a helpless people and continue to help them. Very important lesson for all of us who are serving God. Every Christian is a servant of God. Whatever calling we have, we do it out of love for the Lord, putting his interests above our own interests. When we put his interest number one, then we'll take other people's interests more than our own interests. Because as we go about fulfilling God's purpose, he will meet all our needs, even without us asking. Without even asking, he will give. Psalm 37, verse 4. Delight yourself in the Lord, to give the desires of your heart. He knows the desires of our heart. He knows the hearts. He knows everything about us. He knows the desires we have. As we delight ourselves in the Lord meaning abiding in him, doing his will, we will find whatever we desire in our heart will be given to us, even without us asking him for it. Something very unique about Timothy. I have no one else like him, Paul says. He takes a genuine interest in your welfare. Each one looks out for his own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. So in our ministry, are we serving people, take the interest of people because take the interest of the Lord? That's a fundamental question all of us have to answer before God. And there's so much of joy in glorifying Jesus and blessing people out of love for the Lord. Let's go on. Verse 22. But you know that Timothy has proved himself because as a son with his father, he has served with me in the work of the gospel. Timothy was a spiritual son of the Apostle Paul. He took him on under his wings to be a mentor to Timothy. And Timothy knew all about Paul's life. Paul's life was very, very transparent to Timothy. In 2 Timothy 3:10, Paul writes to Timothy, you know all about my preaching, my teaching, my way of life, my purpose, faith, patience, love, endurance, persecution, suffering. All aspects of Christian existence. You know all about my teaching, my way of life, my purpose, faith, patience, love, endurance, persecution, suffering. Timothy knew all about Paul. He was a son, spiritual son. He's transparent with him. And not only that, he wrote to the church in Corinth, in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, 16, 17. I urge you to imitate me. For this very reason, I'm sending Timothy to you, my son, whom I love. He will remind you about my way of life in Christ Jesus, which agrees what I teach everywhere in every church. Timothy was a co-worker with Paul. Unique aspect of ministry was the fact that he put the Lord's interest far above his own interests, unlike many others, and thereby took care of the interests of people. He says, therefore, Timothy put himself as a son with his father, he served me in the work of the gospel. Verse 23. I hope, therefore, to send him as soon as how things go with me. As soon as I see how things go with me. Hope that I would send him as soon as I see how things go with me. Paul was not sure what's going to happen. And I'm confident in the Lord that I myself will come soon. This word I'm confident actually means I'm persuaded. I'm persuaded, how I don't know, whether through fellowship with the Lord or through people. I'm confident I will come to you. And he says he believes that he'll go back to Philippi and meet these people. It happened or not, we don't know. Because I'm confident, I'm persuaded that I will come soon. But he's sending Timothy to them for them to encourage, for him to be encouraged when Timothy comes back. Verse 25. But I think it is necessary to send back to you Epaphroditus, my brother, fellow worker, and fellow soldier, who's also your messenger, whom is sent to take care of my needs. Epaphroditus was a person sent by the church in Philippi to Paul to take care of Paul's needs. Because they were concerned about him. On one side, they were concerned about him. They loved him very much. They sent Epaphroditus to Rome to take care of Paul while he was in prison. And he says, I hope to send him to you. And actually, Epaphroditus, when he was in Rome, he fell sick. We'll talk about that now. Paul talks about that, writes about that. He was sick. And look at the way he responds to his sickness. Verse 24, whom you sent to take care of my needs. For he longs for all of you, this is verse 26, and is distressed because you heard he was ill. Look at that verse. He was distressed because you heard he was ill. He's more concerned about the Philippian church than his own illness. Here's a man who's ill, and he is concerned that the people in Philippi will be distressed that he's ill. His illness is more concerned about people who hear about his illness. What an amazing selfless perception of one's own sickness. I can repeat that verse. How beautiful. For he longs for you, all of you, and is distressed because you heard he was ill. Verse 27. Indeed, he was ill and almost died. But God had mercy on him, not on him only, but also on me to spare me sorrow upon sorrow. Bible talks about how when you go through trials, the Lord comforts us. And instead of suffering overflowing, comfort must overflow. 2 Corinthians chapter 1, 3, 4, and 5. Pray in God and Father of Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts in all our troubles. When you comfort others in any trouble, with a comfort received from God. For just as sufferings of Christ flow into our lives, sufferings flow into our lives, so also through Christ our comfort overflows. What must overflow? Comfort must overflow, not suffering. Here Timothy is concerned, the news of his illness is reached Philippi. They'll feel bad that he's ill. He was distressed because he heard that they knew he was ill. Not all selfless. Consider about the perception of the church. I'm talking about illness. The fact is, Christians and leaders do fall ill. Don't think that we'll never fall ill. God will heal us, yes. There are examples of men of God in the Bible as well as today who fall ill, and God heals also. That's not saying they won't heal, but sometimes we die of illness. Like Elisha, 2 Kings 13, 14. He had illness by which he died. Paul was ill, Galatians 4:13, he writes to the Galatian church, because of illness, I preach the gospel to you. The very second Timothy 4:20 writes about one more person who left Miletus, sick in Miletus, Trophimus. I left Trophimus sick in Miletus. He was sick, he left him there and moved on. Paul was sick, Trophimus was sick, Epaphroditus was sick, but they were healed. So don't think that Christians should not fall sick. There's a purpose in everything. In the case of the Apostle Paul, he had an illness, and because of the illness, he preached the gospel. Probably otherwise, he was not ill, he would have gone on somewhere else. God had wanted to remain one place and be there. And when he was there, wherever he was, he shared the gospel. Sickness or no sickness. That was his life. That was his purpose for which he lived. In Acts 20:24, he speaks to the elders in Ephesus. Acts 20:24. How I consider my life worth nothing to me, if I may finish the race and complete the task Lord has given me, the task of testifying to the gospel of God's grace. So that's the beauty of these people, that sickness or in health, they never flinch from sharing the gospel. So sickness is normal, but then we heal. And there's a purpose why we sometimes fall sick. God heals us as a testimony to people to glorify the name of the Lord. Verse 28. Therefore, I'm all the more eager to send him. Send him means Epaphroditus. So that when you see him again, you may be glad and I may have less anxiety. Being human, he had anxiety. He would not remain anxious, but anxious thoughts came. For some time, be anxious. But then he said, don't be anxious, to the church in Philippians, 4th chapter, very famous, very well-known verse, 6-8. But he probably was anxious for some time. He says, I send him to you. When you see him again, you may be glad, and I may have less anxiety. Verse 29. Welcome him in the Lord with great joy and honor men like him, because he almost died for the work of Christ, risking his life to make up for the help you could not give me. They could not give him the help. They were in Philippi, he was in Paul is in Rome. They sent Epaphroditus to him, to Paul, and he helped Paul, and he was working in the ministry, not bothered about himself. Selfless. One thing about Epaphroditus we understand from this is he was selfless in his service. Selfless in his attitude towards himself. Concerned about the church, what they think they have heard about that he was ill. This is because of that. He risked his life for the sake of the gospel. And Paul tells the church in Philippi, honor men like him. We don't worship men. We don't lift them up to skies. We honor them. We respect them. Honoring is giving credit to God for their lives. Praising and thanking God for people who are serving God sincerely. And not putting your trust in men, putting your trust in God. At the same time, respecting them, honoring them for the way they're serving God, and thanking and praising God for their service. So Epaphroditus was a person sent by the church to Paul in Philippi, in Rome, and Paul sending him back for the church to be encouraged to the recovery of Epaphroditus from his illness, and also for them to encourage Paul. So I'm sending him back to you. You will be encouraged. I'll also be encouraged. This is fellowship, that we rejoice in other people's ministries. We honor people who are serving God, not glorify them, but honor them, respect them for the work they do. And he says, when he comes back to you, honor him for almost risked his life for sake of the ministry. God bless you all. And I hope that we learn from the life of Timothy, especially here, that he took an interest of the church because he took an interest of Jesus. Not his own interest of Jesus. God bless you all. I will meet on Wednesday. We'll carry on from 3rd chapter of Philippians. Read the whole 3rd chapter before you come. We have the whole, we have time, 1 day's time. And by tomorrow evening, probably this recording will be uploaded on YouTube. If possible, listen to it once again and come up on Wednesday. We'll do the 3rd chapter of Philippians. God bless you all.